So what I have here today is the OG focal clear, not to be mistaken with their brothers or sisters, the Poco X3 Pro or the MG. And in this review, what I'm going to do is we're going to talk about how these things sound, their pros and cons. Should you purchase them, and comparing these with the HD800s, the LCDX, the Aria, also with their own newer version of them, the clear MGs. And also, should you, if you already own these, should you buy the MGs or should you upgrade to the Utopias? I'm going to attempt to do that in hopefully under 30 minutes or so. And yeah, in general, the TLDR of this review is this is basically a no-nonsense headphone. This is basically what I would consider a high-end headphone should look and sound like. It does everything. It does most things correct. It doesn't do any weird things. It's highly dynamic. It's highly detailed. It sounds generally phenomenal, and it has a great tonality. It has a very satisfying amount of technicalities also. And yeah, and it looks beautiful. Not this unit probably, because this is an old roughly used unit owned by Jason, because he doesn't clean his fucking headphones. So I did. And yeah, that's basically a TLDR. And let's get to the build quality first. The build quality here looks and feels like an expensive headphone actually. This feels great. It's made out of mostly metal. You wouldn't have any complaints in how they are built and how they're structured. Even though that these don't swivel, I rarely feel any weird pressure or anything uncomfortable actually. Maybe they are a bit top heavy, but you'll get used to the fit quite easily, but they are not really top heavy to me. It's a bit top heavy to Jason, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, the quality control seems to be a bit not very good because from what I've heard, they tend to have problematic driver failures in some of their units, including the more expensive Focal Utopias. And that is, in my opinion, quite problematic for something that at this price range, definitely. And these also have quite a bit of driver clipping issues. When they play bass, they sometimes clip at, if you play it in the moderate to moderately high volumes. Not so much if you're playing these at lower volumes like Jason would. However, I usually listen at about moderate to moderately loud volumes, and I do hear a bit of clipping at the 130 dBs. It's usually varies between units. From what I know, it's because how dynamic that driver is at it's actually knocking on hitting the frame. And yeah, and I don't think you can fix that, because that's just like problems with the design, I guess. You also get a beautiful carrying case, which all headphones at this price range should provide. And also you'll get something like this, quite a long cable with XLR out, and this makes much more sense than the crappy HiFiMan 1/4" cable, because with this you can actually use a fucking adapter and turn them into 1/4 inch. However, unless you want to blow your headphones out, you can't terminate this into 4-pin XLR. And that's why providing either 4.4 millimeter or 1/4 inch cable is much more logical than providing just 1/4 inch or even worse 3.5 millimeter cables. Yeah. For the sound quality, in general, they're tuned to be mostly neutral, but leaning a bit to the warmish side. It's quite different from the Focal Clear MGs. While the MGs is a bit warmer and leaning to the neutral side, which so these are quite similar to the Utopias. It's like in the middle of MGs, Clear, and Utopias. Yeah, I guess that's the easiest way to explain the tuning. It's quite a warmish neutral, and it sounds good at everything you put on it. It produces almost all kinds of music pretty well, because these don't do a lot to your recordings. It doesn't have any weird ornaments that would ruin your tracks. So it's just a good all-rounder type of headphone. And for the bass, it's definitely a flat bass. It doesn't have that bass shell, but it feels like it has that bass shell because it's a very dynamic bass. It hits you very strongly. However, it's quite like the bass in the imagine if you have the HD800. You notice that HD800 actually have a pretty good and punchy bass, or the 800S. Actually very good and punchy bass, but it's very precise, it's very surgical. Yes, one might call it sterile, but I don't think they're that sterile. It's very clean, very articulate type of bass. Imagine that you'll have the exact same bass as the HD800, but you add a bit more warmth to it, you add a bit more decay to the bass, you add a bit more mass, I guess, to the bass. So it's probably not as technical nor as clean as the HD800 bass. However, it delivers weightily. It has more weight to the bass. So it's generally a very satisfying type of delivery that I don't think I have any complaints about, except for probably the clipping, of course, and these actually don't extend as deep as the Hi-Fi Arias, and that's actually pretty weird for me. If you're playing just lone sub-bass, of course every hit is still going to be more impactful here rather than the Arias. However, in more very sub-bass focused tracks, you would notice that the Aria actually has a slight edge over the Focal Clears. Yeah, I guess that's for the bass. For the mid-range, here is very special. It's very warm, it's very lush sounding, very lively type of mid-range, but it doesn't sound the most neutral type of mid-range. It doesn't sound bad, it doesn't sound weird at all, but it's not the most neutral type of mid-range because of that dipping in the upper mid-range and that little bit of hump in the 800 to 1K region, which actually emphasizes some of the fundamental tones and de-emphasize a bit of the harmonics, which makes vocals sound extra warm, if that makes sense. And with this type of presentation, you might also feel some of the piano tones to sound a bit withdrawn, especially in the upper notes. And though these type of weaknesses definitely exist, some might actually prefer these type of presentation because it's more relaxing. It doesn't fatigue you that much. Though some people might find the 1K hump to sound a bit too much in your head. I sometimes definitely feel like that. However, it's not to the point that I would prefer to not wear these. I would prefer the general tonality of, for example, my HE800s. So these actually have quite a class-leading level of tonality, in my opinion, if you're looking for the general warmish neutral type of sound. I don't think any other headphones at this price range would perform as good in the tonality department if you're looking at those type of sounds, and also the technicality department, which we'll get to later. The treble region, however, it has a bit of quirks here, which I don't prefer for them to have. So with that dipping at 4K and 5K region, and the focal clear actually treble region actually peaks up again at around the sibilance range, which might make some of the vocals on a not very well treated recording sound a bit sibilant and sharp and sometimes intense. And though I don't feel that they have quite the metallic timbre which some people complain about, it does sound a bit elevated there, and might bother some who is actually very sensitive to the sibilance range. It doesn't really bother me that much, though I know some people who feel that the peaks here is a bit more annoying than the ones in the HD800s. So I would recommend you to try these before actually purchasing one. Though if you don't have any problem with that small sibilance range peaks, you would notice that the treble region here is actually quite smooth overall. It sounds very safe, very natural sounding treble. It doesn't do anything wrong except for that part in the treble. For technical performance, I would argue that these have a quite solid performing technical performance. They do resolve quite well. I think they have a slight bit better resolution if you're going to compare these with something like the HIBY Arias. However, you can listen to the details there is slightly easier for you to listen. It's not just slightly, it's quite it's easier for you to listen to the detail of the HIBY Aria because how they are tuned. But in terms of just how much resolving is when I am, because of the better microdynamics in the vocal clear, I think it resolves a bit more detail better than the HIBY Aria. However, comparing these to the LCDX, I would still argue that these have slightly bit better detail retrieval. Although in most tracks, you would not notice the slight detail upgrade from those headphones, because those headphones are very detailed headphones. I'm not saying that the Arias or the LCDX is under detailed. They're definitely a very detailed headphone. They're detailed than a lot of the ZMF's headphones. They're maybe not on the level of the Veritas, because they're also very detailed. However, the vocal clear maybe edges over them just slightly. In my opinion, the clear is slightly a bit under detail if you're going to compare it to the HD800s. However, the HD800s is actually known for its phenomenal detail retrieval. I don't think it's a fair comparison. I think the HD800s, if you're gonna actually compare the detail retrieval, it probably you would I think the HE800 is a bit closer to the Utopias rather than the Clears. Though the Clears and the Utopias detail retrieval is, while noticeable, it's not as substantial as you think. That makes sense. It's not as different as the HE800s compared to the Anandas, for example, or the Clears compared to the Anandas or the Sundaras. It's not that different, but it's noticeable. Like these compared to the HE800, it's quite noticeable also. And for macro and micro dynamics, this headphone does that phenomenally. It like sounds tend to in a lot of orchestral music or OSTs, you would notice the macro and micro dynamics here is very good. Or even when I listen to a lot of WWE entrance music, some of them are actually very well mixed and recorded. Most not so much, but yeah, I might need to list which ones are good. Maybe later. I kind of forgot the titles because there's just so much of them. There's so many of them. And yeah, the soundstage here is not impressive. It's definitely, if you're looking for soundstage, don't go to the Focal Clears. If you're going to look for dynamics, yeah, go for the Focal Clears. If you're going to look for the resolution, go for the HD800s. If you're looking for resolution without the peaks in HD800s, if you are bothered with the peaks of HD800s, which I'm not, these might suffice, I guess. Though it doesn't really scratch my detail itch like the HD800 does. I'm sounding like a simp for HD800 just because I modded these like a few times ago. These just sound insanely fantastic with the mods I did to them. Even without the mods, I really like them. Because I don't listen. I didn't hear the peaking of the HD800s, or I'm not actually bothered with the peaks. That's why I'm becoming the HD800 simp, because those things are crazy in value, especially when you can get them second-hand. These, however, let's talk about value. These are actually now $900, if I'm not mistaken. That is insane value. If you're gonna get these for $900 new, get them for $900. It's insane in value. For comparison, the LCD-X Creator Edition, if I'm not mistaken, is about $1,200. The Aria is $1,600. These are $900. And there are a lot of things that these things do that those two headphones can't do. So, the Focal Clear, in my opinion, is one of the best value headphones at this price range. If you are considering the new price after the MG got released. Imaging quality here is also very good. The stage is quite deep. It's not probably not as deep as the Arias, but it does perform adequately at this price range. So they're okay, I guess. And yeah, just a very correct sounding yet highly dynamic headphone. For comparison, I did a lot of comparisons already against the HD800s. I'm not going to consider the modded version. I'm just going to consider the modded version is going to get its own video, I guess. Just consider the stock version of the HD800s. If you're going to listen to a lot of vocals, don't pick the HD800, because these here, while their vocals don't suck as hard as, dare I say, the 1266. I don't know, man. My experience with 1266 isn't very impressive. I might need to listen to them once more. These don't have that type of soulful and very good presentation of vocals, in my opinion. The vocals here sounds a bit distant and sometimes a bit dry. However, you won't face that type of problems or issues here in the Clears, because these have fantastic vocals. They sound good, except for that sibilance problem. Or if you don't like that type of warmer presentation of vocals, you might get deterred by how the Focal Clear present the vocals. although these have a very excellent presentation of tonality, it's not perfect. For example, I mentioned that some piano tones I would actually prefer in the HD 800s over the vocal clears. But in general, in most cases, I think the vocal clears would win in tonality department. But the technicality department, the HD 800 still wins at almost every region, except for probably timbre, and I don't know if I think timbre is a bit mix of tonality and technicality. In general, presentation of timbre and the what do you call it? Dynamics, yeah, and macro dynamics. I would still think the macro dynamics of the clears a bit better than the HD 800. Not that this isn't a dynamic headphone; these sound very dynamic. However, the clear just noticeably better in macro dynamics. However, if you would, but not by really much, realistically speaking. If you're looking for a cleaner, more precise bass, or just more precise sound in general, I think the HD 800 is better for you. But if you're going to look for something more fun, more lush, more thicker, more enjoyable, and less fatiguing, maybe the clears, except if you have problems with that peak here. Yeah. Against the HIBY Arias, I have it right here. The Arias, in my opinion, I still prefer the presentation of vocals in the HIBY Arias, for my personal preference, because I actually prefer in how they present the vocals in front of you rather they are in your head. And with that in mind, I personally, with the extra soundstage and with the better depth and layering and separation in the HIBY Aria, I can't see why I would pick the clear over the Arias if they're at the same price, which they are not. Let me remind you that the Arias might be like twice as expensive as the clears now. Are they $900? I kind of forgot. Maybe they're $900. Yeah, the HIBY Aria, for my personal preference wise, and because of their quality, they're slightly better. They're accumulatively better technical prowess and better presentation, subjectively better presentation of their vocals. I would pick the HIBY Aria over the vocal clear. Against the LCDX, the LCDX is kind of like if you overemphasized the warmth in the clear. This is the older set of the LCDX, not the newer 2021 version of the LCDX. This LCDX is actually pretty peculiar one, I guess. It's a 2014 design with a 2016 design driver, which means it has that phaser, like double phaser, and it has the memory foam pads, which if I'm not mistaken, is from 2018. So it's quite a mixed type of LCDX. I know if other people have LCDX quite like mine. However, I really like how these present their sound. It doesn't sound as weird or as incorrect as people might actually expect them to sound. That makes sense. I think it's a bit warmer than the vocal color, quite a bit noticeably warmer. No, it has that better separation, better stage width, and also it has that quite bit of better layering. And yeah, it's a very unique type of sound. It's also a very clean type of presentation, especially in the bass region. It's a bit cleaner than the vocal. However, the vocal is a bit more dynamic in the bass, rather than the LCDX. However, it's much more articulate, I guess, in the LCDX than in the vocal clears. I could point out a bit more details in the base of the LCDX rather than the focal clears because of that extra cleanness, I guess. Cleanness of the planar driver. So yeah, however, the overall tonality and presentation is obviously better in the focal clears, and it's a bit more dynamic, it's a bit more detailed also. So if you're just gonna own one headphone, I would not recommend the LCDX because these might sound a bit peculiar in some tracks. However, in the focal clear, you will get everything quite correct sounding. If you're gonna have like 5 different headphones like I do, I would personally prefer the X over the clears. That's why I don't actually bought the clears. And also the X and the Arias and the HG800 doesn't have that type of problem in the drivers with their clipping in the moderately loud volumes, which I tend to listen on. And a few tracks like Wedding Day from St. John, is it St. John? Yeah, maybe. I do hear a bit that clipping in the bass. So yeah, sometimes it bothers me, but in most times it doesn't actually. To answer the question, should you upgrade from these or should you buy the MG instead? The difference of these and the MG is just in the tonality. If you're looking for more warmth, you might buy the MG. You might prefer the MG. From what I've heard, from what I remembered trying them on, the treble is not very as intense as in the clears, the OG clears. However, this definitely still sounds more neutral and more correct in their tonality department, their tuning. Nothing much is that different, so it's more of a pick your poison type of choice. However, should you upgrade from the clears to the Utopias? For me, personally, no. Because the Utopia, what the Utopia provides you, it's quite a different type of presentation. While it's definitely much more detailed than this, it's noticeably more detailed than the clears. It's a bit more dynamic also. However, it kind of loses the warmth in the focal clears because how they play on their harmonics and their general tuning. They might emphasize a lot of the harmonics in some instruments, so they tend to sound a bit brighter than the clears if you're looking for that type of sound. And in my personal opinion, except if you're looking for that type of dynamic driver sound, if you're looking for the epitome of what a dynamic driver can do, yes, you should buy the Utopias, because that is the most resolving, basically what a dynamic driver can do. The king of dynamic drivers probably is the Utopia. Or the HD800. I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, because there are a lot of things that the HD800 can do that the Utopia can't. However, it presents detail with the correct tonality and in crazy amount of dynamics. That's what the Utopia can do. And no other headphone can do all that simultaneously at that level, right, other than Utopias. But if you like the warmth of the clears, and especially considering the 2,100 or like those things are fucking $4,000 or $3,000 or $4,000. It's a very significant price jump from the clears. I would just advise advise you to just save a bit more and buy the Sasvaras, maybe, because I don't think that the price jump on from the Utopia, from the Clears to the Utopia, is that worth it. It depends on actually the buyer. Actually, if you have like a lot of money and you really like vocals and you really like the Utopias, if you tried one and you really like the Utopias, who says don't listen to me, just buy bloody Utopia. But that's just my 2 cents on the matter. I guess that's it for the review. Don't forget to watch Jason's video. See you next time. Godspeed.